Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Modern Web Development Toolkit series. If you're not sure what the toolkit's about, go back to part 1 where you get an overview of the tools that I'm going to be talking about. In short, they're all free cross-platform tools that'll just make your student course projects a lot easier. They're mainly aimed at web programmers, but other types of developers or students can use them as well. Now, today I'm going to be talking about Yeoman, Bower, and Grunt and how you can use them to set up and manage your web projects. So we're going to start out using Yeoman to set up our project folder. And Yeoman uses generators, and you can just go up to yeoman.io and click on Discover Generators to find one of the many thousands of Yeoman generators that are available. The one you'll be using today is called Web App, and you can get more information about it on its own page here. Gives you some install options, and I've already installed it, so I'm not going to go into that in any particular detail, but you're going to use Node Package Manager to do that. So let's start out by creating a project folder, and I can do this from the GUI, I can do this from the command line, and but I'm going to do it from my IDE, my Integrated Development Environment. In this case, it is Atom. I like Atom a lot. So I'm going to add project folder and put it on there. We're going to call it app test. There we go, and open it up. So right now it's empty, as we can see. So I will now go to the command line. I can do this from within Atom if I wanted to. I have a plugin that'll let me do this, but I'm going to do it from the command line anyway. So let's go into my app test folder, and there's nothing there, but there's going to be there sometime real soon. I'm going to run yo, that's the Yeoman command, and I get a nice little menu telling me what I want to do, and I can install a generator from here or just go ahead and run a generator. In this case, I've only got the one generator installed. I'm going to select that, Web App, and it just reminds me to go ahead and make sure I'm in my folder. Now it also says, well, what other packages do you want to put in there? SAS is a CSS preprocessor. I'm not going to use that, as I'm not really a big SAS person. Bootstrap is a very nice framework for creating responsive web code, so I'm going to leave that in there. And Modernizer is really a browser feature detection library. So yeah, well, let's leave it off for now. Just keep it simple. So I'm going to press space to unselect it, and then I'm going to go ahead and press return so we can continue. And then it's all done. Now it's going to do sort of the setup, and I may have to run this myself if I get a lot of errors, but at least Yo lets me know if something goes wrong. Here's what you got to do. So it's going to take a few moments because it's got to download the packages and frameworks that my project is going to need. In the meantime, we look here, and we can see that in my app test folder, I now suddenly have a whole bunch of folders and subfolders and configuration files, and we're going to be looking at these and figuring out what they are in a little bit as soon as Yeoman is done. And how are we doing here? We are still waiting, but I guess in the meantime we could take a look at the project folder itself. I should mention, if you're a Mac user and you've got the free developer tools installed from Apple, you may have a problem with this software. You might get an error saying you need administrator privilege. In that case, just run Xcode and for just once and accept the agreement, the license agreement that comes up the first time you run it, and then you should be fine. Because I ran into this previously, so I don't use Xcode a lot, but I was getting this error when I was using Yeoman. Because we can see right here that in my command line, it's cranking out here. It's just kind of telling me what it's doing all sorts of happy stuff, installing Node modules and caching stuff and fixing. I'm not quite ready to go but I'm going to get there. There we go. All right, I'm done. And if this basically says, okay, I want to install, I'll come back. If I want to upgrade Bower, I'll come back later and maybe do that. But let's take a look at my project folder. As we see, one is empty. Got a bunch of stuff in there now. Let's take a look and see what we've got. We've got a .bower.rc. This is really just a configuration file for our Bower package manager. We've got editor config, .editor config. What's that? Well, let's take a look. That is basically a little standard configuration file that is cross-platform, and just make sure that all of the editors that you use kind of the same settings, so you can have consistent coding styles. If you go between VM, VI, and Emacs, and Atom, and whatever, any editor you've got that sort of recognizes the .editor config file will use this. We also have the .git attributes site, and this is very much a configuration file for the Git version control tool. If you're not familiar with Git, get familiar with it. You're really going to need version control if you're going to be doing software development. Another Git file is .git ignore. This tells Git what folders, what paths, what files to not track. So very useful if you've got some temporary stuff. You really don't want to be saving that to your project repository, because it's going to be changing a lot, and it really doesn't have anything to do with your project itself. We also have yo.yo-rc.json, and this has the Yeoman generated configuration info. RC, in fact, stands for run control. It's a very old school configuration file extension there. And JSON is just JavaScript. Object notation is just a text file format for a standard way of passing data around in web coding circles. We have bower.json, of course, the package manifest for Bower. This tells us what packages are in my application. So we did install Bootstrap. Bootstrap has some JavaScript with it. It has some CSS. Tells us what versions of these various packages are installed. So this is something for Bower to make sure that when your package gets installed, your application gets installed, that it's got all the right dependencies set up. We have node_modules, and this is really just the locally installed node packages. And it's going to be maintained automatically, so don't touch node modules. You don't have to do anything with it. NPM will handle it. Package.json is some metadata for your project. So it has stuff like, it may have stuff like your name, or just sort of data about data, or some general info about your project, what versions of packages it's using, and so forth. Now, this is also something that you don't have to fuss with, but you're going to use this if you're going to create an installer package for your application. You're going to use this to describe to NPM how to set up your application. And finally, we have our test folder, and this is our application unit tests, and we're going to use Mocha by default for our test package. But I'm not going to get into that really a lot right now. It's kind of out of the scope of this screencast. Now, notice that this is not really a Git repository yet, even though it's got all these .git files in it. You would need to use Git to initialize this as a local repository. So if you go in here and just run git init, or use your front end Git tool like SourceTree, and tell it that this is another local repo, but Git is once again kind of beyond the scope of this little tutorial. So, okay, we've got something going on. Here's all my application code. So we always saw fonts and images, scripts, styles. Index.html, this is sort of my boilerplate template web page stuff, and this is where I'd actually do my development. So let's try this out. Let's see what's going on. So there's my I'm going to use Grunt. Now that I got Yeoman to set this up, I'm going to use Grunt to do some work for me. And there is a Grunt task called serve, which is pretty cool actually. And what it does is it fires up a web server. And this is my web code running in my default web browser. And it's live reload. So if I wanted to just kind of, if I make a change, it's, let's see, so I'm going to say home page, home, sweet home, and I'm going to save my changes. And now home becomes home sweet home. There's my home tab. And so I can watch my changes, and since it is a server, I can be running, you know, if I have PHP code in there or anything, I can be running that. And it just makes development really, really snazzy because you just you don't have to refresh browsers or anything. And now, if your default browser is Google Chrome, little side note here, and I'm a Chrome guy. If you don't see the live reload on this, you might have to install the live reload extension from the Chrome Web Store. So just a little tip for you Chrome users. Now, if I want to go ahead and stop that server at some point, and by the way, I see my little log file that says, "Oh, you changed index.html." Yes, I did. So I got a nice little log of what's going on during my server session. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. Hold down the Control key, press C. In other words, just give a good old Control C. Give me some stats, and we can move on. Now, at this point, if I wanted to, I could just go ahead and work on my code and set it up the way I want, and then just deploy it straight from the app folder if I really wanted to do it that way, because the app has everything that my application requires. But if I do that, I'm missing out on the true power of Grunt and Bower. So what I'm going to do instead is show you the way you're supposed to do it, and once again using Grunt. So I'm in my app test folder, Grunt, build. Now I hit build. Notice a lot of stuff's happening here. One of the things is it's looking for a folder called dist. If the folder dist exists, then it's emptied out of all of its contents. Otherwise, it's going to create an empty dist folder. The components installed by Bower are going to be linked into index.html. And the CSS files, all my CSS files are going to be combined together. So if I got a bunch of style sheets, they're all going to be sort of appended together and then shrunk down and minimized so that they load really quickly. The JavaScript files, similarly, all my JavaScript files are going to be combined and then minimized because I want this thing to load fast. We're going to add some vendor prefixes to my CSS styles. The process files that are then copied to my dist folder, as we see that there, font, script, styles, and the files are renamed to speed up caching, because once again, we're trying to be snappy here. Not everyone has really high speed broadband. We want our stuff to load and run fast, and the HTML files are also minimized to speed loading. So let's take a look and see just what exactly that means. Well, we got an index.html file in here, and this is the one, this is my original one from the app folder. And here's the one in my dist folder, my distribution folder. Now, look at that. It basically takes out all the extraneous spaces and carriage returns and stuff because this will load faster. This actually will save space in and when I go to load this page. You don't need as much bandwidth. It loads really, really fast. And if we go to the CSS styles, there we go, and we take a look, and it's the same deal there. All my CSS stuff is minimized, and all my JavaScript should be under scripts. Boom. Not a lot of stuff going on there, but they're all just sort of jammed together. Everything will load much, much faster after I've done my build. So when you deploy your application, you really want to do it after you build. And this really, really makes things much better for you. So the question is, how did that happen? What actually went on there? Well, let's take a look under the dist, but under app. And so I'm looking for my grunt file.js, and there it is. Okay, there's grunt file.js. It's a JavaScript. Grunt speaks JavaScript. And you notice there are two sections. The beginning of it writes out the functions. These are JavaScript functions that Grunt can use. So we see the clean function. Down here we see an init config function, browser sync, live reload, and all the rest of it. And down towards the bottom, you have the tasks. So we have grunt.register tasks. So when I say grunt serve, what I'm doing is telling Grunt to run all of these functions. And this was all created for me by my Yeoman generator. I didn't really have to do anything else. And I can run my unit tests. I can clean up my folder. Let me do that here. Let's do a grunt clean. Boom. And notice that my dist folder is now empty again, and all the temporary files are gone. So very nice way to just kind of clean up your workspace. So let's take a look. We'll continue on this grunt file. That's how grunt works. Now about Bower. Once again, we'll look at bower.json. And note at the top of the file, we've got dependencies, Bootstrap. So my application requires Bootstrap. So if I package this up to an installer and then have someone use npm to install it, npm will know that it's got to grab Bootstrap, download it, and set it up. So they would just run Bower install, and this also means I don't have to include Bootstrap because it's going to be installed automatically. But let's say we want to add another package. In this case, I want to add, let's see, I've got, here it is, Dante. Dante is a WYSIWYG text editor that you can embed inside your web page or inside your web application. And it's HTML, JavaScript, but it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to install that. I want to configure that so it's Bower install Dante -- save. Now I do the -- save so that Bower will record that this package is now part of my application. Otherwise, it's just going to install it, but it's not going to put it into bower.json. So give it a moment. It's going to go crank, 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 crank pretty fast. Now I go back to my bower.json. Now I see Dante. Dante's right there, and here's the version. And so that package is now set up. I'm good. And if I look at bower_components, I now see Dante in my bower_components folder. So it's all taken care of. I don't have to go out and manually set this stuff up at all and make sure that the file paths are all set up. And also because Dante requires sanitize.js and underscore. These are dependencies for Dante. I don't know that. Bower knows that. So if I just installed Dante manually, I would be in trouble because it wouldn't work, because these two packages would be missing. So I mentioned before, you don't have to include this folder when you distribute your application because you've got that information recorded in bower.json. So let's test this. I'm going to go into bower_components, and I'm going to just sort of delete all of these folders. Just get rid of them, trash them. And just to make sure that they're definitely gone, I'm going to empty my trash can. So boom, they're gone. I'm in so much trouble, but maybe I'm not. So I'm going to run Bower install. just make sure, yep, Bower Components is empty. And now crank, and Bower just puts them all right back for me. This is nice. Now, all the packages we've just deleted all get reinstalled, so I don't have to include them if I create an installer package for my application. Very, very handy. Saves me a lot of bandwidth. Saves me some disk space. Now let's get hardcore, and I'm going to go into my app folder here, and remember that's where my original sort of code base is. And I'm going to go to index.html, and I'm going to look for the script tag that links in jQuery. So looking for jQuery.js. jQuery, whoa, helps if I can spell that. There it is. There it is. Now, let's say I had links to pull in Dante. So I'm going to probably just go copy that, make it easy. So I'm going to, I want Dante sanitize underscore. So sanitize underscore. Because remember, these are the packages I just installed. Now, just because I installed them does not mean they're automatically part of my code. I do have to link them in. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. And now let's go back and do grunt build. Grind. So if we distributed our application just using the stuff that's in the app folder, think about this. Our application would have to do a separate request for every script component it loads. Similarly, if we've got multiple style sheets, it's going to have to sit there and request this one, and then this one, and then this one, and this is going to increase our application loading times dramatically. But, as we saw previously, the grunt build command is going to concatenate all of our JavaScripts, all of our style sheets, rename them to be more caching friendly, and make our application run faster. So, your web development workflow, if you're going to use these tools, is now you write your code in the app folder using your favorite tools. Once again, you could use Notepad if you wanted, and grunt serve. Give you your little local reload server. Then you add any additional JavaScript packages as required using Bower. Periodically commit your changes using Git, or push them out to your code repository on GitHub or Bitbucket, whatever your version control routine is. Just do it as normal. And then when you're ready to deploy, you run grunt build and then just upload the files under the dist folder. And this just makes things much, much easier. And I hope that helps you get started. I think that's enough for you to get going on, and I appreciate your attention. So part 3 is going to be coming up. We're going to talk about some more tools in my toolkit.